welcome everybody to episode 29 of the Faith and Whatever podcast, where we talk about things like religion and whatever else we feel like. Currently sitting here super excited, but we are Garrettless this week. Kind of a bummer. He's got a wife to take care of. So fair enough. I'm with, as per usual, Jamathy Ewell and Christopher Carmen, myself. I'm on Twitter at Josh_Carmen. You can find Jamathy at JamesYuile. Garrett is at TStudentLife, and Chris is at Marion Ranch. Thank you for that intro, David. Super sick new,
that's my favorite,
fresh album coming out
next month.
We'll have it out,
yeah,
on Marion
awesome
Ranch.
musician.
So we're super excited to, kind of support that and be a fan of that a little bit.
Yeah.
So feel free to also follow us on Twitter. We are at faithandwhatever. Just wanted to take a second and say thank you to all of our friends who have supported us thus far. We are officially $1 in to our multi-million, billion-dollar empire. So super epic. You can connect with us on all forms of social media. We have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. So I guess just those three forms of social media. We don't have a Path account yet. We also don't have Periscope or Snapchat. So anyhow.
Why is all that money behind you, Josh?
And
why are you sitting on that bed of money?
Because we are going to be talking about tithing today. And I am super excited about this topic, largely because of what it represents in the church. One of the biggest critiques that you hear from people outside of the church is that pastors and people of religion of any, sort are simply looking to get your money. And while this is true in some cases, I think Joel Osteen is a great example of this. I think he's an awful person.
He's the nicest awful person ever.
Yeah, I kind of think he's a snake a little bit.
He's selling snake oil.
That's how I feel, yeah. For sure.
Name it and claim it, boys.
And have you seen his new house?
Is it beautiful?
You're just mad because you don't live there.
And I would never live there. I could not, in even bad conscience.
For the record, I would totally live there.
And
I haven't even seen it,
I wouldn't.
But I can imagine.
It's bigger than his $2 million house, which is right next door. So take that for what it's worth. It's like a 65 million square foot lot.
Yeah, but like a $2 million house in LA is like what?
No, Broham, this is
a 2-bedroom one.
It's a $2 million house in Texas.
I mean, you can't just go by the price.
And you can in Texas. $2 million in Texas gets you West Texas. So we are going to be talking about this, where where tithing originally comes from, why people say 10%, just some other feelings and thoughts that we have on the general value of tithing and what have you. So real quickly, I just want to get some thoughts. Let's do this. Let's very quickly talk about where we originally see tithing come from.
Yeah, bang through the history of this for us, will you?
And yeah, we'll do it super quickly. Tithing originally appears in the Old Testament, right, which is called the Hebrew Scriptures, and it has to do with Abraham giving a tenth of what he has to Melchizedek. Is that how you say that?
You're not going to go back to Cain and Abel?
Melchizedek. And I'm talking about specifically the 10% part, tithing as we kind of understand it.
I was going to kill you because your offering is way better than mine.
And so okay, so now I have to go there since you brought that up. So Abraham is a son, or I guess a great-grandson of
Who's the
many
first
greats.
bro? Abraham?
Abraham. Cain and Abel are the sons of Adam and Eve in the
Bible
story.
jokes are the worst.
And yeah, dude, I feel like we should say none of them. Joshua, son of Nun. It's double clever because it's my name and it's the Bible character. So Cain and Abel are the original sons of Adam and Eve until Seth came along and ruined things. And Cain decides to kill Abel because Abel's offering was far better than Cain's. Abel offered sacrificed meat. Cain offered veggies. God is clearly against vegetarians and vegans. That's what that story means.
So then Cain went on supernatural. And
exegesis is fun, kids. And so, so Cain kills Abel, and this is where the question comes from, am I my brother's keeper? To which the answer is yes, to some degree you are. So God banishes him, and then that's where it starts. This is the idea of bringing a tithe to God. And giving an offering of your first fruits specifically to God. Not giving God what you have left over, but giving God a portion of your first stuff. So basically, what we see in Genesis 14 is
it's
Abraham...
an act of trust.
Yeah, trusting that God's going to take care and provide.
Yeah.
And so Abraham in Genesis 14 gives a tenth of his offering, or a tenth of his possessions to Melchizedek as an offering. And we don't know why it was a tenth. My dad actually has an interesting theory on this, that he just thinks it's simply because he looked at his 10 fingers and just gave one of Yeah, that was the base
It's
10
like,
because we think in base 10 as humans, right? And so 1 is good out of that. I don't know. So
It's easy math.
yeah, it's not wrong.
Back then they worked. Usually it was the power of 9 was what the math.
Oh, sorry, Dad.
I don't have 9 fingers.
Well, Abraham might. That's a rough life as a itinerant sheep farmer, and which is not what he was, but he was a nomad. So this is where the understanding of 10% typically comes from in the modern church setting. So I'm going to turn it over to James and let him tell you why that's not actually New Testament biblical.
Well, it's not. First of all, if you want to tithe 10% to your church, kudos to you, because trust me, unless you go to a mega church that's just spilling over in cash, likely your church needs it. Most churches are around 100 people or less, and they're usually having to spend a lot of time thinking about their budgets, and they're usually hurting for cash. Not every church is like this.
The national average of tithing, just for the record, is 2%.
Yeah, 2% is the national average, and it's I'm again not trying to shame anybody or anything like that, but I'm certainly not trying to dissuade you from giving. Something that's important to sort of understand when you're talking about tithing is a lot of the Old Testament scriptures on tithing are very much spoken in the context of a nation. Nations need taxes in order to function as nations. And also there was a professional priesthood for the nation that needed, in order for them to be professional priests, they needed people of the community to support them. So there was a temple tax, and there was priesthood taxes, things like this. And they would just say tax, or the Hebrew equivalent, whereas we don't have to necessarily just call it tithe as if it's not what it is, which is some sort of a tax. But in the New Testament, when we get there, you're not the church isn't operating the same way the nation of Israel is. The church is a voluntary body. There aren't a lot of professional preachers. There's Paul, but Paul is really an exceptional figure. There'll be more people like Paul in the 2nd century and the late 1st century, but in the early church, there's not a lot of what you call like professional ministers. It's mostly voluntary roles. What they're really trying to do is collect money for 2 things: church need, so people in the church who have need, and also to give to the poor, to the needy around the church, and also to address sort of contextual needs. So Paul, for example, there was a basic, as far as we can tell, there was a year when Jerusalem came into famine, and there's probably a lot of need in and outside the church, and Paul collects money from his churches to deliver to Jerusalem to help with that famine, right?
We often forget that this is like the main earthly reason for Paul's missionary journeys, is to collect money for that famine in AD 49.
Yeah, if you want to look that up on Google, it's the collection for the saints. That's usually how it's referred. And that was when Paul spent a lot of time traveling to collect aid for people in Jerusalem. And a lot of his letters are tied to that need, that very interesting ministry he undertook in his life. So anyway, in the context of the New Testament, which is a different sort of context, tithing is usually, or giving is usually spoken in terms of excess, right? From your excess, give abundantly and with a full heart.
Like the poor widow who only had 2 coins?
Well, I'm just saying, I said usually, not 100%.
I know, I'm just like throwing wrenches and things.
Right. The thing about the widow is what's really happening there is obviously that story is happening, but it's happening as a contrast, right? That story in the Gospels happens at the end of a week of Jesus being in the temple, where he has seen lots of extravagant giving. He's heard a lot of people have a lot of arguments about giving money or withholding money from God in ministry. He's just kind of been amongst some of the hypocrisy he has seen there in the temple situation, at least from Jesus' standpoint. And at the sort of the apex, the end of that week, he sees a widow who just gives those 2 coins. And the way I interpret that particular story is it's not meant to be she's so holy because she gave to everything she had. I see it as more of an offense. He says, out of her faith, she's given everything to this temple, and the implied commentary there is, and what is the temple giving back to her?
Right.
And that's when Jesus leaves the temple and gives what we call the speech on the Mount of Olives, which is very much an anti-temple speech. So I think that observation there is not so much about how holy is she, although quite righteous and quite trusting of God and very good to give from what little she has, but it was really more an observation about the temple robbing even the poor, right? Pressing the poor for everything they have. I think that was more the observation in Mark and in Matthew, where that story appears. Anyway, that's an aside. So I view the New Testament teaching to be mostly one about giving from your excess. Now, what I mean by that is not, out of the money I don't care about, I'm going to give some money. That's not what I mean. By excess, I mean your bills are paid, your kids are fed, the money you have left over, give from that, which is often money we want to play with.
Yeah.
It's money, for me, I want to buy video games, right? For others, it's I want to go on vacations. And what does it mean as a living sacrifice to give from money that I could use for myself in as an act of faith in thanking God for the gift of life?
But that's not an act of faith if you're giving from excess.
I would think so.
Not at all.
Well,
if you're giving from excess. I mean, I could give.
I don't mean
from excess to my buddies who might need a.
You're missing what I mean by faith in this particular case. I don't mean faith as in I have as in trust. I mean faith as in
commitment
and belief, right? That God did make the world and He does sustain us. I mean that's what I mean by faith when I say that phrase. I don't mean like I'm giving out of what I have because I believe it'll come back to me some other way, like as an act of trust.
Right.
And obviously faith is trust. It's just not the way I meant it there. Did you want to pick up the conversation?
Yeah, I've actually had to do it the other way. Because if I give before I pay bills and before I do all that stuff, I'm sorry, if I give after I pay bills and do all that stuff, I probably won't give. I don't think I trust myself to be mature enough or responsible enough to do that. So I've had to do it right off the bat as soon as I get paid to make sure I do that. Because it's doubly hard for me to give because finances for my family are just super tight right now because we're still in school, we're paying off loans, and $100,000 in student debt is not something that you get rid of easily or quickly. And so I've had to make it a point to consistently tithe. I've set up an automatic tithe where I'm alerted every time it goes out, which I think is... I kind of have a problem with that a little bit because I'm not physically, I think there's value in that just for myself to be able to see it. I don't think there's anything biblical about that whatsoever, one way or the other, because it's the intentionality behind it.
Right.
But I still get an email every night or every Sunday at midnight when my tithe has gone through, and it makes me just uncomfortable enough right before I go to bed, just to think, oh, that's X amount, less money that I give. And one of the things that I've actually thought about, or Chris, do you want to have any thoughts in here before?
No, I'm with you. I think it goes back to even like Dave Ramsey has said about saving. If you try and save out of your excess, it's the same problem.
Yeah, I am not mature enough to do that. and it took me a long time to recognize that about myself. Like I can't be trusted to do that. And it's, and so for me, that's just not an issue.
By the way, I want to make a clarifying statement. I don't mean give 10% of your excess. I never brought up 10%.
Right.
I mean, give of your excess.
For sure.
It could be give all of your excess.
Yeah, most definitely.
Which is what that is it's that it's an act of making sure that you are responsible, which is paying the things that need to be paid, and then giving of all the desires and fun and entertainment of your life.
Because I do that. I do the same thing, just the other way around, right? I say, well, these are bills that I have to pay in order to continue to live. So this is the money that I'm working with in terms of...
Certainly, there's nothing wrong with having a plan in which knowing yourself, knowing you won't give, putting down a plan where you take care of that ahead of time.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, what is the New Testament imperative?
Yeah,
we can always work beyond the New Testament imperative. We can even encourage people, why do we work beyond the New Testament imperative?
Totally.
But that's different than making it an essential of Christian faith.
Yeah.
That's a slightly different thing.
No, I agree. And Paul talks about this discussion in 2 Corinthians 8 is really where he hones in. And this is a verse people kind of appeal to a lot to do the health and wealth, name and claim kind of thing.
Yeah.
This is how the whole scam that is basically all of TBS got started with evangelism preachers and that kind of thing. Send us your money and God will bless you physically. Just so you know, if you follow anything like that, that's trash. That's trash exegesis. That's trash a lie that's been told to you.
What I particularly don't appreciate that a lot of those televangelists push is that you give in order to receive later.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
give your 10% and see how you'll be rewarded for it.
Right.
That's also not really a New Testament principle. That you give out of an appreciation, not out of a gamble.
Yeah.
A gamble to get back.
Yeah, you might as well go play craps.
Right.
For that. And that's, for me, that's been the biggest thing, along with, I heard a pastor say, and this was very influential on me, saying, if I'm a believer, I've already dedicated the totality of who I am over to God, right? I have said the cross is my true north, and I will follow that until the day I die. Hopefully, that's my goal, to always continue to work out my salvation in fear and trembling, but to commit myself and all of myself, including my resources, to God. So the question that I need to be asking as a Christian isn't how much am I going to give back to God, since it's all God's anyway. It's how much of God's resources am I going to keep for myself there. Right. And that's helped me a lot in being less selfish with my money, particularly.
Can a man rob God?
And right, I don't. I
Does
think
he have
so.
a gun?
And so it depends on which God we're talking about.
Oh, that was a Micah reference.
Another thought in all of this too is, oh no, I lost my thought. I was gonna say another thought in all of this is, some people make the claim, well, I don't give much. Maybe I don't give any monetary giving, but I'll give my time.
Sure.
But I want to warn that that's often just a way of making us feel good about not really doing anything at all. That we neither give money nor do we give much time of any value. If you really could give 10% of your time, and again, 10% isn't a New Testament thing, but just using it as an example, giving 10% of your time would be quite a charity as well, to do selfless acts for other people, to go to a woman's house who is in need and
2 hours a day.
Right. And to build something, fix something, to go to the church and help clean it. So to do a number of any acts.
Well, if we're going to keep with that, right? If we say, okay, I give 10% of my time, I'm just not going to give 10% of my money. That's 16.8 hours a week, right? Of your time that you're giving back to the church. Church related,
you're working at the church part time.
Yeah. So. Probably most of us aren't doing that. I would imagine that probably most of us are giving 2% of our time, just as in 2% of our resources. That strikes me as true. And I think that's a great point, man. I wanted to look kind of what we see in other religions, kind of giving and what giving looks like, and kind of compare that with our own understandings of tithing.
Don't talk anybody out of the faith.
And why we think ours are better. But the particular example that comes to tithing for me is the Mormon Church. There is just an amazing amount of bureaucracy almost that goes into the Mormon Church with giving in particular, and forced tithing
and giving of time too, because most Mormon churches don't have the sort of preaching and ministering paid staff that a lot of like larger Christian churches do. And that's usually all filled by volunteers.
Yeah. And but they even do the 2 year of their life, right? And you go on a mission when you turn 18, and you go for 2 years and 20. So I think there's some good concepts here that the Mormon Church kind of promulgates. I love the idea of the 2 years of time. I mean, I think it's an awesome thing that people commit to that. Yeah. I would just wish they committed to it for the right gospel. And
snub.
And so, whatever. You can't have your cake and eat it too. And so, the 2 year idea is cool, but the thing that is interesting to me the most is just the requirement that is giving, as if it's a prereq in terms of being able to be a part of the church and a part of the community. That makes me, pretty uncomfortable as far as all that stuff goes. But so ultimately, the thing to take away from this,
that was our one thing.
And that was all I had for that. Did you have other religions you wanted to?
I didn't
other
know.
secch.
I thought you had like maybe 2 or 3.
No. Catholic Church is kind of the same way, right?
I wouldn't call Catholicism.
No, either other sects of Christianity or other religions.
that would be fine. Other sects of Christianity.
And so SECTS.
Sex and parties.
And so, I don't think Catholicism's a different religion, although it might be.
Just kidding. No,
It depends
no.
on how many saints you
no.
pray to.
Oh my gosh.
None. You should pray to none because they're not saints. Okay.
Didn't they
Stop
just have
it.
a big meeting
Oh
about
my
this?
gosh! Stop this! Stop
So,
this! Stop
stay on
digging a
tithing.
hole.
Anyway,
We'll piss off the Catholics next week.
man,
We're pissing off regular Christians today.
that's
right?
that's the richest government in the world. I'm not messing with the Catholic
The
Church.
Vatican.
Some of that's true.
I will
yeah.
disappear. The Catholic Church and
I'll have to come looking for you.
Hillary.
Leave me a message in anagrams.
So
If I grow my hair any longer, I'll be ready.
oh man. So I'm interested though, as a takeaway from this. I think the most pragmatic takeaway that I've seen with tithing is that people often ask the question, "Am I tithing enough?" Right? If I can't give 10%, what can I give? That's enough. And again, we want to say 10% should not necessarily be your standard bearer. If you can give 5%, and 5 is all you can physically afford to give, then great. I think it's really about the intentionality of the heart behind that, and those are the things that I think God honors, right? Those are the things that I think God looks to. But the litmus test for me for giving has been whether or not it makes my butt pucker, meaning that when I see that payment go through, if I don't tense up just a little bit, I feel like I need to give a little bit more.
Yeah, and I would say, and also notice that it's if there's any pain given, it's only to yourself here.
Yeah,
You're not taking food out of your kids' mouths. You're not
Not yet.
you're not choosing to overlook a bill to your phone company that you've racked up, right?
Yeah.
So that's not what you're saying. But what you're saying is that you're losing a portion that would have been nice to take to Las Vegas or something like
Totally.
that. Right. And instead you're choosing to send it this
Or to
way.
buy groceries.
I don't think
Yeah.
we have to warn too many Americans to not take
Give
their
too
food
much.
budget.
Sure. So do you have any last thoughts you want to add before we
No, I
wrap
think
up?
I've said everything.
Chris?
We're running out of time, but I was gonna start down a road with taxes and people who are happy to pay those but don't want to contribute to their church, but we're coming up kind of long already.
No,
I
I
don't
think
think
that's a great
anybody's
point.
happy to pay taxes.
Yeah, a lot of people will say they're glad to pay some. For
Yeah, a
their-
lot of people are liars.
Oh,
or they
just
think
say
that there's
that.
a social contract that they should have to pay their taxes, but then they don't want to pay back to the church that takes care of their kids every weekend. And
Feeds and nourishes them spiritually.
yeah,
That's pretty good food for thought. So we'll leave you dangling on the line, as they say. Consider whether or not you feel that the urge is rising up in thee to tithe a little bit more of what we may have. I feel like, for the most part, we can always give a little bit more. There is no doubt we have an abundance of excess here.
and try it as an act of faith. See what happens.
And yeah, I heard a funny line as we wrap up here. Do I give on the gross or on the net? And the response is, well, do you want God to bless you on the gross or on the net? And I don't think that's necessarily a good concept to live by. But yeah, I mean, it is food for thought. So take that for whatever it's worth. Also understand that God does ask, I think, in the New Testament, to say that we step out in faith and do think about the idea of giving, not just because it's a good faith exercise, but also because the church uses that money to do good things.
Also, if we want to use the New Testament as a reference, then sell everything.
yeah.
Tithe 100%.
So feel bad about yourself, Christian, for not doing that.
Buy a sword, sell your jacket,
And go.
and go.
So again, as always, you can find us on all forms of social media, all forms being Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Faith, the letter in, whatever on Twitter, Faith and Whatever on Instagram. We are at facebook.com/Faith and Whatever. I'm Josh_Carmen. Garrett is at TStudentLife. Jamothy is at James YUILE. And Christoph von Karloff is at Marion Ranch Records. Thank you so much for stopping by.